This is Pam Electric Ghost. We're live on the air with Kelly Gagalis, online dating safety expert and dating coach. And I want to
Hi.
welcome you. Thank you for being on the show. It's always cool to talk to new people. We talk to new people pretty much every night. And we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at the moment. And we want to let people know we have your URL, www.swipesafely.com. That will be fully clickable. But you might want to tell people that's you could hold off on clicking that right away because you're still kind of setting that up, right?
Right. It's the URL is live, but you can't make a purchase for the app. It's not released into the App Store, either Google or
Okay,
Apple yet. But you can go to the URL and you can follow it on Facebook, Instagram, and get updates for when it is live.
that's awesome. So I want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network, and you can check that out if you want to check out that coupon code of Ghost. Will be on Newsly later tonight. That's an audio version of the podcast. And what we're going to talk about in this episode is why is online dating so unsafe, and we're going to talk about your story, tell your story about how you created this app and the things that you do as a creator. But first thing we always ask anybody, a couple questions we ask any guest is like, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Oh wow, that is obviously a great question. I really care about people. I know what it's like to have made decisions that you were ignorant of how to do it any differently, and have those decisions or that lack of knowledge really change your life forever and not always for the better. And as I was a dating coach, as a marriage and family therapist for years, I just saw how not having the information you need can really put you at a disadvantage. And in dating, where it is so dangerous, most of the time it's fine if you make a mistake, but there are instances that if you make a mistake, it changes, it traumatizes. And wanting to keep people safe, wanting to keep people so that they can still pursue love and happiness. I mean, that's everybody wants to be loved and be connected. And if you can't do it in safety, that's just not going to work. So that's what drives and motivates me.
I think it's real important because people think they see an app, they see it's on their iPhone or whatever device they have, and they assume, well, it must be okay because it's on the, I can get it on my phone or I can get it
Mhm.
online. And they assume that maybe the due diligence has been done and they might not be aware of the potential traps, or the pitfalls because they assume, that, there's a lot of things in the past. People, would go to certain, websites and just like, oh, I'm going to have somebody come to my house and go check out some stuff. And then you're opening yourself up to potential threats without realizing that maybe there should be some, some, some concern or understanding of what is the actual vulnerability.
Absolutely. There's Our phone is such an intimate part of our lives now, and we trust it. We trust it. We Google things, we trust the information that we get. And so when somebody shows up on an app, we kind of lose the perspective that this is a stranger off the internet, that creating a profile or a persona, even if you start talking to them or even meet them in person, nothing they're telling you has really been vetted. You don't know if it's really true. I mean, there are several Netflix specials out now about people that were completely blindsided by somebody being, lying about who they were,
Yeah.
having it have really, really bad repercussions.
Yeah. Even people like influencers who put on a face.
Right.
You go check, and then even in their personal life, that face they're putting on is not really who they are, or
Absolutely.
maybe too much of who they are, right?
Right.
and and it's like got a negative aspect, and so it's really important for people just because it's on the net doesn't mean it's okay. It's kind of like in this world, like I'm an IT person, and I'm aware of you can create like bots or fake profiles. You can use AI. You could have somebody impersonating. Could be you think you're talking to a female or a male, and it could be the opposite, right? It could
Exactly.
be some person is just a hacker, they're just like a fraudster. They're
Absolutely.
out for your money. They could be out for something else. So it's rather daunting if you can't go in with the blinders on.
Absolutely. And I kind of look at it like different levels. There's people that are, like you're saying, that are bots that are pretending to be something that they're not because they're trying to get money or information that could lead them to money by interacting with you. And then there are people, and 90%, 99%, somewhere in there, of people that are on dating sites are really authentic. Maybe they're a great person to connect with, maybe they're not, but they're not trying to do harm. But it's
Hmm.
that 1 to 2% that they're there, they're looking for someone with the intention to do harm, whether it's
And
physical.
predators. Yeah.
There's a predator of some type. And so, whether they're preying just online and wanting to move to WhatsApp or whatever, and just trying to digitally prey on you, or they're trying to physically prey on you, we want to make sure that you're still open and acting normally, and you can still attract a great person to date and have whatever kind of relationship you want to, but still keeping yourself safe from that infiltration, that of someone that is not who they say they are.
Yeah, there's probably like the what is like there's probably multiple things. There's like a you could go through like levels of like the number one thing to do to stay safe, but then there might be a top five, top 10 things to do to stay safe. And maybe you can kind of go about like what's the highest priority in those things in
Yeah,
terms of like what's the
absolutely.
number one thing you shouldn't do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so it really starts with, before you even get on the apps, I encourage everyone to use Google Voice, and if there's I don't know of any other services that are free and so easy.
Oh, they let
Um,
you say a different number. Yeah.
Yeah, and let you get a different phone number, because if you give there's a bunch of reasons for this. If you give your actual phone number out, the first thing that happens is this complete stranger shows up in between texts from your very best friends and the people you love and trust the most in your family and in your life. And by association, whether you mean to or not, you get the feeling that they are a trusted person
Mhm.
because of the company they're keeping in that little text thread on
Oh,
your
so your
phone.
mind thinks of them as like, "Oh, this person is in
Yeah.
my Rolodex, they're in my favorites, so they're okay."
Exactly, exactly. And so you're not it's a bias you're not even aware of, but that will come through. And the second thing is, it only costs about a dollar or two to take a phone number and pay a service to look up who the person, their first and
Oh,
last name, where they live, like all these associations. So once your name, once your phone number is in someone else's possession, you are vulnerable to them knowing where you live and being able to track down the people that are important to you in your life. They can follow you. They can do anything they want within the
mhm.
boundaries of the law, which is quite a bit in the stalker realm. So
Yeah.
to really want to make sure you tightly control, you never give out your last name. And the rule of thumb that I tell my clients is, and this is quite a while, is you really want to be able to see the person that, I always say, everyone shows up in dating and they're trying to be their very best self, right?
Mhm.
So there's your very best self that you can be, and then there's, like, for a certain percent of the time. And you wanna see, can they show up as their very best self for 90% of the time or more, and and do we like who they are? And then with that, you wanna make sure that what they're telling you about their job, about their family life, their personal life, who their friends are, where they live, you wanna make sure that those things track. That it's not like, "Oh, yeah, I know I said these friends, but," and there's always an excuse or something for
Oh, yeah.
why what they told you doesn't match up.
Doesn't map out. Yeah. Yeah,
So
you don't wanna have, like you never get to really, ever at some point, the people have audio calls, they have video calls. They're like, how do you really know that that's the person you're talking to?
yeah, so you've gotta hold this, like, you've gotta trust, because you're trying to connect with someone. So you have to trust to a certain extent that they are who they say they are, but you don't let yourself be vulnerable. And if there is something that is concerning, you don't roll over, you don't ignore it. You question it, you research it, you follow your gut and your instincts on it, right? You don't just be polite and like, "Oh, I don't wanna offend him," by, asking him, well, why, or her, why she said that she works at this place, but now she's saying she works at that place. What if things aren't adding up? You really want to make sure you're holding that while you're, doing the dating process, which is being the best version of yourself you can be.
Well, I've run into it just being like a podcaster where
Yeah.
people will come to me, say they love the show, and then suddenly want to do some kind of Bitcoin like
Oh, yeah.
transaction. Well,
Yeah,
wouldn't you like to invest for your show to like invest in this blockchain,
yeah.
Bitcoin, whatever? And as soon as like there's got to be something, or they say, "Oh, I've got like a sick grandmother. I need this. Can you like you're this celebrity? Can you help support this?" So you'll get all these scams that just
Mhm.
come out of, and you just like you don't want to be blocking people all the time, but there's some things that's obvious. Like
Right.
I see that crypto thing, I see the scammer kind of it's like I've
Yeah.
got a Nigerian on and they want me to cash the check for $1 million. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something very obvious.
Right.
Even though they seem very obvious to some people, depending on their age, if they get in the dating game and they're like in midlife, they might not know that that's not something
Absolutely.
to do. So, I've heard of like, older people getting tricked by these kind of blockchain crypto type people.
Absolutely. So anything blockchain, anything crypto, anything where somebody is asking you for money or investment right off the bat is just a no-go. Just it's not something that a normal person who's looking for a relationship does. And the scenario that I have seen the most is men and women in their 70s or beyond, either having lost a spouse or never been in a happy marriage or a relationship at all, and not realizing. I've heard this so often, this phrase, and it was so surprising to me. And now it's not. But when I first started hearing it, it was surprising that they would say, I didn't realize how vulnerable I still am to romance and the desire for love and connection. Right.
Mhm.
And so what scammers that are playing the long game, the crypto is like, hey, can I get a hit? Is this going to be somebody that's maybe dealing with dementia or some kind of has some other reason that they would be vulnerable to just immediately giving their money away. Then the second level of scammer is someone that will woo and will say things and say beautiful things that people long to hear and they say, I've longed to hear this my whole life. I felt like even they will know that the person is a scammer, but they just want to
Get the
pretend.
attention. Yeah, because they're saying the right they're triggering, they're saying the
Yeah.
right words.
It's like being addicted to smoking or to drinking. There's an addiction to this feels so good. I feel connected. I feel feelings of love that I haven't felt in years or decades or
Yeah,
ever.
like you're getting like love letters and somebody's getting really
Yes.
or they're using the information that they pulled because they're
Yes.
very you get some people like will play the long game. They never ask for like any kind of crypto or anything, but
Right.
they'll be in it maybe a couple months, but they never even bring up that crypto thing. And then they
Mhm.
might come at it. I've heard this kind of scenario where somebody, well, I'll show you how I do foreign currency exchange, not asking for any
Mhm.
money, and then
Yeah.
show you that they made money.
Right, right.
Right? So
Absolutely.
they never asked you for anything. They said, "Well, wouldn't you want to get in on that?" And
Mhm.
I found somebody that had told me about that, and I'm like, "Wow, that's really interesting," because they kind of played a long game.
Mhm.
Wasn't immediate, maybe a couple months of kind of wooing, and then
Yes.
they snuck in with that, and then the person was kind of defenses down. So why not?
Exactly.
You
Is it
know?
like, "This feels like my friend." And one thing that scammers will do to lower the financial fences is they might ask for a low stakes, money, like, "Oh, my brother is stuck," they'll have a reason, "My brother's stuck somewhere and I can't could you lend me $40 or $200?" And then they pay you back. And maybe
Yeah,
do that once
they
or
can make you
twice.
believe. They make you believe it. Yeah.
And so it's like, "Oh, I've got this pattern that I lend money to this person and they're safe because they pay it back." And then when they do hit you up for the bigger investment or whatever, it's it's playing on that feeling of like, "Well, I can trust them because they built the trust, right? They paid it back. They they kept their promise, so you feel a connection and feel like you can trust them."
Also, like if you're in dating, like initially, like you don't give out your number, you do the Google Voice, but do you actually like hold back on your name and
I
other
highly
information
recommend that.
initially? Initially, you actually don't go with like, and if you don't go with your name, do you like go just with your first name, or you go with like no even first name? What do you
Um,
do?
as long as it's just the first name, unless you're a public person, like if you're a phantom and you told someone your name was Phantom and they could look up your podcast, I say don't go with don't go with the Phantom, because that could be something you could be traced down. So if I had this happen to me a couple of times where they knew that my first name was Kelly, and they knew that I was I was a dating coach, and only a couple people did it, but they Googled me and were able to they found me. And so I'm
They
like, okay,
figured it out.
so you have to really be good about, like, if they can take your first name and you give them clues into what you do for a
Yeah,
living,
do the research.
everything's on. Yeah. I mean, I found I started once it happened to me, I started going online, and about 1 out of every 10 profiles, I can, maybe 20 now, because sometimes men are harder. With women, it's actually easier because women are more likely to put more information, and men are very Spartan
Mm,
with their
mm.
information. But so with men, it takes longer. Women, it's easier. But I can figure out who they are and where they are in the world based on just what they put online. So even when you're crafting your profile, you've got to be you never put your actual workplace. Even you want to do a general, like, I won't put who I am, although now I'm becoming more public, so
Yeah,
it's,
yeah. So you kind
you
of
know,
know.
back when I wasn't, like, I would do something like, I would say counselor, right? I would use a word that isn't in my search or whatever. Or I would say consultant, something that hinted at what I did, but didn't specifically say it. And it wouldn't be a term that would come up.
Yeah, you don't probably want to be giving them your LinkedIn profile.
Yes. Don't link your Instagram. I know that a lot of apps will let you do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so
Don't
you're saying that's a bad idea to link to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that?
Yeah, do not do that. Somebody can find you. That's just like handing them the keys to the kingdom,
Yeah,
honestly.
because you might have posted stuff that's gonna give them, like, the history. Like, you might have gone
Exactly.
and posted pictures of your family, videos with you and your family, videos of your house, all kinds of stuff, and if they're, like, a nefarious person, they can get, like,
Mhm.
the mother load of everything. It's like, "Oh, wow, I just found, like, everything I need to know."
Exactly. And it's not just you that is compromised. It's if people live with you, if you have children, like, this is a way that somebody that isn't functioning in a way that works for the safety of others, never mind that they could go down the street and find someone. Maybe it's the hunt that they're after. We don't know, and we
Yeah,
don't care.
yeah.
We just want to make sure that you're not showing up as easy prey. And that's kind of what I do in Swipe Safely is my goal is I can't keep everyone safe. I can't be there, even if I could. I mean, we had a former president shot at. Like, there's no way to
Yeah,
100% of the time
for safety, yeah.
keep guarantee safety. But my goal is to make it so that you are harder
For
to
the
get
time.
information on, to be to do nefarious things to, so that they move along. They're like, okay, this is too hard. This person is too hard for me to infiltrate, for me to take advantage of, and they lose interest and move on. That's the goal.
Kinda like one of the reasons I go with my, stage name
Uh
is
huh.
because I created some separation, because
Yes.
in my day job, I'm in software design, and
Yeah.
I kinda wanted to separate my side gig initially from this, because,
Absolutely.
some employers might not be into the things I talk about, and everybody's, like, looking at you, so if I made it really obvious, when c people do, for my resume, for if I'm picking up a gig to work with a software company and they have a certain
Mhm.
point of view, and I talk to somebody that didn't like that point of view, then they could,
Oh
like,
yeah.
use it against me. So there's some level of protection to kind of separate my two worlds.
Yeah. I
And
never even
I
thought about
think
that.
people ought to think about that, like, in the dating world. I thought about it when I created the podcast, because there have actually been podcasters who have been attacked because
Oh
they
wow.
actually, people found their house, came up to him and attacked him. And
Dang.
so I decided, like, having some separation is not a bad idea. I'm a musician in separation in my band anyway. Kind of have
Right.
my band kind of persona versus,
Right.
before I even created the podcast. But I think it's good. It's a good practice to kind of have some separation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just kind of piggybacking on what you just said, mostly Most of the physical and sexual violence is against women and gay men. That's where the majority of that kind of thing will happen. But straight men feel this like kind of invincibleness and invulnerability, and you can be stalked, and somebody can stay in the like outside the realm of crossing the law. And so you can feel unsafe for years at a time because someone is constantly threatening you, and that will debilitate you. It'll make you in fear for your life, for your children. So really, people need to take this very seriously, that you just want to guard your privacy as much as possible.
Yeah, in a world with AI and all these other things, like people worry like the AI learning libraries, sometimes, people don't realize like you opt out a lot of times to some levels of privacy just to use some
Oh,
tools. Like
interesting.
my understanding is just to put it out there, like Instagram and Twitter and a lot of social media actually in the US, in Americas, because we our privacy rules aren't as tight as EU.
Mhm.
He had these buried things about like using all the posting information you're using in their
Interesting.
large learning libraries.
Wow.
So that if you didn't opt out, it's using it. So the problem with AI is, if somebody's a really good like prompter engineer, they can go find things. And if
Right.
it's not protected, they can get it. And people have found people's addresses that are supposed to be private. They found information, records, stuff they wrote, all kinds of things because the AI wasn't smart enough to hide it. And it's learning so much you could pull it. And
Right.
so it's the same kind of idea. You have to be kind of mindful and then not be fearful of technology, be aware of how far some of the privacy goes and how far behind we are compared to like our technologists have made things so you can do something, but maybe nobody actually checked the ethics or the morality of being, well, maybe you shouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
And the laws haven't caught up with what the capability is. So the capability is beyond the law or the rules are way behind. So
Absolutely,
have
and
to be
someone with
mindful
no
of that.
technical ability, like someone like yourself is probably able to go in and keep some safeguards up, but someone like me, someone without technical ability, that's just not possible.
Yeah, I think it's just like the level of privacy, the discussions with like privacy ethicists are increasing all the time with AI because people can go and take your image and then pretend they're you.
Right.
Someone could like hijack you, take your voice, and then become you,
Yeah.
right? It could be unbeknownst to you having a conversation, they're recording it. They train their AI to become your voice and they go have you say things or do things or show things you never did. And so
That's
the technology is even beyond what we expected before. Like
right.
the bad things that happened before, there's like new bad things that can happen.
Oh, man. That is that's crazy. Like, so there's a whole new level of harassment that could happen.
Yeah, depending on the sophistication of the person,
Right.
if they record you while they're in conversations with you on WhatsApp or something,
Mhm.
and they could theoretically do what I just said. And
Yeah.
so that is a whole different level of danger that you have to be know when you feel comfortable to get into that level of conversation with anybody you're talking to online.
Right. That That's just crazy. And so just to be clear, we want everyone to be dating. We want you to be using the apps because one of the great things about apps is it used to be, you look around your friend group, you look, there was no way to meet someone that would be a good fit for you that may like Malcolm Gladwell's The Long Tail has been the best description of how the internet has changed things both and his marketing examples hold true in the dating world. He said, these little, you can have a store where you make pieces for an outdated board game. You'd never be able to have a business like that if you were just selling to people in your town. But when the
Yeah,
whole world is looking, as a potential client, then you can have enough clients that you could actually make a living off of this very niche,
yeah, very niche
hobby or
thing.
whatever.
Or
And
that's like the law of attraction. Like you go out there as a podcaster, because I'm a podcaster,
uh-huh.
I get agents for authors, musicians that see me, and then they approach me and they say, "Oh, can I get on the show?" So I
Okay.
get like a kind of kind of this constant like feed of leads. It's a lead generation thing. So the net can be a lead gen, but you have to think about like in terms of dating, in terms like date generation options. Well, you have to look at the risk involved, the risk like dynamic. Like what are you willing to put yourself into a certain category, knowing that not everybody's going to be the super threat, but it is possible that there are like threats.
Exactly, and like we said, most of the time, thank goodness, what a horrible world it would be if, like, apps wouldn't work if most of the time
It was a
bad
threat.
things happen. So so, most of the time, it's just normal interactions, and some of them work and some of them don't. But we really wanna make sure that especially when you're getting to know someone, that you're just the easy things. This is the low-hanging fruit, and anybody that's intelligent on the other end of receiving this, is going to understand and be like, and hopefully be admire that you want it, that you have boundaries, that you can keep yourself safe, that you're intelligent enough to think this through. For me, if I knew that somebody was cautious, I'd be like, oh, this is someone that knows how to take care of themselves, knows how to keep themselves safe. So this is someone that potentially, as a partner, hopefully that transfers in, like, they're not going to be someone that's jeopardizing me or somebody that's going to
Yeah,
make bad
yeah,
decisions if I were to get in a relationship with them. So you don't have to worry. One of the reason I started doing this is I have a program, I call it Hero Dating, where I work with people. It's a very it's a high-end boutique experience, and we really go through, like, not just like figuring out their dating profile and stuff, but I'm a therapist by training, and so I go through, okay, what's happening in their dating life, what's blocking them, why haven't they had the results they wanted, is this an issue that we need to do therapy for, do we need coaching, like, I have all the tools to go at this. And what I realized about 5 years into doing this was my clients weren't having the, like, I would go to parties and people would say, "Oh, do I have horror stories for you?" Right? Like, when they would find out I was a dating coach, and I'm like, my clients don't have these horror stories. Then I started asking my clients about it, and they all said, "Well, we had those horror stories until we started working with you." And so what I realized was that the process of vetting that I was teaching, that was about vetting to see for compatibility, also was making them too hard of a target, right? They weren't just showing up
oh
like,
wow,
"Hey, will you like me? Will you
yeah,
like
yeah.
me, please?"
It's
You know?
teaching, yeah. Well, you have to love yourself. You have to do some
Mhm.
self now, like a looking glass self. I'm a poet, so I'm a writer.
Yeah.
The kind of idea of the looking glass self, like a lot of artists will look at that, right? But then a lot of times we get into the trap of, okay, we create the crucible moment because that's what creates our art. So we
Okay.
then kind of get end up being a perpetuating like the bad situation because it generates good art. Like as if
Oh, wow. That
I
would be hard.
have bad relationships, I can write the great song.
Okay.
So I continually keep on going into the bad relationship because it gives me the content for my song,
Okay.
which tends
Okay.
to work better than if it's about a bad relationship rather than it's a perfect relationship. Because most people don't want to hear that song. They want to hear the song about the bad relationship.
I like those songs. I really like those songs. But yeah, no, I get you. I get you.
So then you have to get yourself out of that kind of downward spiral to create your art. Oh, I have to be in that bad place to do the art, right? You don't always have to be down in the dirt to get the greatest effort. And sometimes artists like they come to learn that the hard way. Um,
Mhm.
but I think a lot of people probably go through, they're looking for these ideals, and then they're kind of maybe you're suffering from imposter syndrome, and so they don't feel they're good enough, and then they're looking for something that's really not a match. It's kind of like perceived match. It's like this idealized version
Yeah.
of love that's not really workable. It's like,
Yeah.
is that really what you want, or is that because you read that, or because the Joneses have that, or somebody else has that? Like, what is it that you actually are looking for, and is it something that makes sense for who you are?
Absolutely. You nailed it. It's I think not everyone has the musician's pursuit of the angst in order to create great art, but, my friend and I were just talking about birth to age 5, you kind of get conditioned for what you will perceive love to be. Just like baby ducklings imprint on their parents, children imprint on their parents and the way that they relate. So we could have these scripts and these automatic things we're seeking out that we're completely unconsciously aware of. Um, the most universally recognizable is there's a people are learning about attachment styles, and there's the avoidant attachment style and the anxious, right? The avoidant, whenever people get close, they always drift away. The anxious, when someone drifts away, they pursue. So
Mm.
those are the two that end up getting together because pursuing feels normal and natural to a child that has always had to pursue love and been ignored, and to an avoidant, if they grew up and they were avoidant and like had an anxious attachment style, they're used to a parent pursuing them and then withdrawing, and that feels comfortable and normal, even though we know that is not how we feel comfortable and content and safe in a relationship.
Yeah, it seems like the opposite attracts might not be the best scenario.
you know it's uh,
Everybody's always kinda going for that, and
Everyone
then
goes
the
for chemistry, and I'm like, "Oh, no, we want chemistry." But I say it's like short-term chemistry and long-burn chemistry.
long-term chemistry, yeah.
Let's go for long-term, the kind that builds because, wow, you are so kind to me and you are so safe. That is sexy. And of course, we wanna be able to do the things that make the sexy feels happen, but if we don't have that safety underneath, it's just gonna it's like a firework and then it's
Yeah.
gone.
Well, the thing is, like, if you get attracted to the person, the guy that you really can't stand, but you're somehow attracted and you somehow you think you're gonna, and even as a guy, like, I attracted to a woman that really doesn't respect me, but I'm
Yeah,
attracted because she's beautiful or she has, there's all these talents, but she's really never really gonna sync with me. It's never gonna be long term. It might
right.
be like a short-term link, and it's not something that's sustainable. So if you're trying to, it's like a fad diet. It's like it's not gonna last,
Nailed it.
right?
You
So,
nailed
like,
it. And no
it's
matter
like,
it's
how do you get people to kinda counterintuitive? Is like, it's the person you can actually talk to for the next 20 years that you probably wanna be in the house with, not somebody that you wanna kick out after 10
absolutely,
minutes.
absolutely. Well, and so what I'll hear from people is, they won't be conscious of it, and the chemistry will be amazing, but then, it's not someone they can't create that safety. And so it's always this, and then they get mad at this person, and then the anger drives a wedge between them. And then on the flip side, I know that there are people that like they'll try to go for someone that's really like safe and they can be content with, but they don't know how. Like if you're avoidant, usually you don't know how to bring the energy to a relationship, you
No.
don't know how to be the leader.
So
And
they're
so
always
they
being a leader, and then they get sick of doing
Yes,
it.
and so they think, "Oh, there's no chemistry between us," but really chemistry is two people choosing to create interest and curiosity and to create pleasure, whether we're talking about sexually or talking about the pleasure of surprising someone with flowers or a considerate gesture or filling up their car with gas or whatever it is that makes your partner spark and feel like you've seen them. And if you can't lead with that, and the other thing that people don't know is chemistry and sexiness is a learned behavior. It is learned behavior. People that have the most chemistry and sexiness are usually the ones that have had experiences where they got a lot of reward for how they looked throughout their life, and that just made that focus on it. And there are some people that they have sexiness going on because of the opposite. Like there's always they kind of figure it out, and they if you ask people that do well with sexiness, that do well with chemistry, you find in their history that at some point they figured out, oh, I can create this, I can tap into that energy, I can turn it on or off, and I can turn the other person on or off. And so
Mhm.
you don't have to be locked into thinking this, chemistry is a mystery and I just have to land in it with someone.
It's
No, you
kinda
just
like you have to practice anything. Like,
yes.
and I
I
think
was
a lot
gonna
of
say
times
you
people don't
read it.
practice
It's
communi communication, like, people just assume
Yes.
there's a soulmate and somehow you don't gotta work at that. Like, if I'm a musician, like, to write my album, I have to do a lot of work. It just doesn't happen, right? And
That's
so
such
in
a
like a
I
relationship,
agree.
like you're gonna have to work. Like, so if you take the time to actually have empathy and
Yes.
connection, and it's exciting to have that kiss, but it's exciting to talk for 3 hours and forget the time. It's exciting to kind of be
Exactly.
really drawn into the things that your partner does that are different than what you do, but you have an appreciation. So if you can have that connection where you get this appreciation, that all the things that are them, they are them or you in the combination and the respect. Like I think sometimes relationships are so like it's like is there somebody that's alpha, somebody there that's like not alpha or respect or it seems to be like there's not a balance. I'm a
Mhm.
Buddhist, so if you can find somebody that there's a balance and there's a synergy and there's like, oh, then it tends to work versus like if there's a lot of imbalance, it might be really fiery,
Mhm.
but it's actually not as sustainable and kind of fraught with a lot of problems.
Absolutely. What I teach my clients is you want someone that lives in their best self 90 to 95% of the time. And the Gottmans did some great research and they're just starting, they always published it as like research, and now they're starting to kind of synthesize it. And one of the things that they talk about as being the cornerstone of every great masterful relationship, which is what they've studied for the past 30 years, they call them bids for attention. And so there's a few keystones. Like if I say to you, "Oh, there's a bird out the window," I'm not I don't really want you to like love the bird. I'm saying, "Here's something I think is cool.
Oh, moment you
Will
want to
you
share,
come
yeah,
will
yeah,
you come share this with me? How will we create a moment together based on this thing that I'm a little bit excited about? Will you add to the pleasure of the moment? Will you add to the energy? Will you make it enjoyable?" And those are the moments, those bids for attention that build a relationship versus, "Oh, cool, birds are cool." And like then that's a flat and you haven't built anything together.
yeah.
So yeah, I love what you're saying. I think a relationship, just to keep going with the musical analogy, it's an album, right? And sexuality is one of the instruments that's going to be featured on the album, but like you said, deep conversation and playfulness and adventure or quiet time, whatever vibe you want to create on the album, that's your choice, that's your journey, but it's going to take work, just like you said.
Well, it's like, I'm a synthesist and I'm a musician, but I tend to talk in terms of like harmony, being in tune, being out of tune, dissonance, and discordance. And you can relate those to all the relationships, right? You go walk in a room and immediately pick up like a bad vibe from somebody,
Yes.
right? Nonverbal, initial bad vibe, then you talk to them even more bad vibe or a really good vibe. And
Yep.
some people can kind of radiate in a frequency that's like that's harmonious, or it's actually something that's gonna be like the law of attraction. You're gonna get pulled into it. And in music is like when you have a band and everybody's like non-verbally in connection, like the band's hitting it that night because we're all in the same frequency. Everybody's having a good night.
Yeah.
On some nights, that same band, the drummer's out of tune, he's out
Yeah,
of
it's
frequency. He's like
yeah,
he had a bad night.
yes.
He was thinking about something bad, and now he's totally out of sync. And you were like,
Yep.
"What the heck happened?" It's like, "Well, not everybody's always in sync."
Yes.
And so I think that it's always like a continuum. Do we let that go and say break up the band, or do we work to find out why was the drummer out of sync?
How do we get it
What
back in?
can we
Yeah.
try to get him back in the fold so he's not out of sync,
Yeah.
or we just fire him?
Right, which is so inefficient, and that's a really great analogy because that's what people do, like, "Oh, I'm gonna fire them." And let me just say, to be clear, when you're first dating someone, that's like going through a lot of first dates is not unusual because 'cause you're starting from ground zero, where you don't know anything about people and, you meet them in person, like, that's different than getting in a relationship and having it be hard and then, a couple months in firing someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Also, there's a huge I could go off for a very long time on how our culture sets people up to feel like they have to be in a relationship and they can't just date. Like,
Yeah.
it's like
You
0
have
to
to
sex, and then they're
gotta
in
go
a
0 to
relationship.
100. You gotta do
Yes,
it 0 to 100 because your friends are wondering why you're not hooked up, right? So then they think there's something wrong,
yes.
right? And it could be that you're not in the right time, right?
Right, or the right person,
Yeah,
or
it's like it's all kinda like you gotta be in alignment, and that if you're not in alignment and it happens to be that your friends are, so they have
right,
relationships, but you don't, well, you're not on the same timeline, right?
right.
You're all kind of running parallel, and they assume that you should be where they are, but that's not no one's gonna be exactly where somebody else is. And
Nope.
so that if you get forced into accepting something that doesn't really vibe with you,
Yeah,
accepting a relationship that doesn't match just so that you can go to the wedding with somebody. You can go to the party
right.
with somebody. You can go to the, whatever, the picnic with somebody. Maybe you shouldn't, be forced into that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and just that idea, what the hardest thing that I have with clients is teaching them, "Hey, I want you dating, first dates, third dates, fourth dates, for the first like 6 to 7 weeks until you really know someone. I want you to have a couple different people or more that you're going on those first. I'm not telling you to sleep around with a bunch of different people. I'm telling you to just, you know, if you never tasted ice cream and somebody said, "Okay, I'm going to bring you to an ice cream shop. This is your first taste of ice cream, but the first flavor you pick is the one you have to eat, and you can only eat that flavor of ice cream or buy that car for the rest of your life." That's too big of a decision to make without
Yeah.
having test driving, without sampling. So I want you to sample, not do anything that is against your own personal morals, but we've lost this culture that we had in the 1900s to like the 1940s, where if you watch movies or read books from that time, it was very normal to go out on a date with one person on a Friday and a different person on a Saturday, and that wasn't slutty behavior, that wasn't promiscuous behavior, that was normal behavior.
Yeah. It seems sometimes like moral, like, roles have been kind of imposed by certain people's like ideology, right? So if they come in and they say, well, they look down on somebody doing
Mm,
this kind of dating, right? And so they
right.
put shame on it. They put
Yeah.
the shame on it. They put the like, oh, they you gotta be, you're not as perfect as this other person because they can just, find this like soulmate right off the bat, and they never have to do all that. And that's kind of like the ideal. But
Right.
that's kind of like it's this idealized vision of love that might be controlled by multiple types of religions or spirituality, saying that that's what it should be. But for
Right.
you, like your own personal experience, is like I need to kind of know people. I need to know like who I would really like, and how am I going to know if I don't talk to anybody? And how can I just
Exactly.
assume that I'm going to find that soulmate on like, oh, the second date, first date, I'll find the soul and that's it. It shouldn't go any further because that's like shameful for me to go further.
Right, right. Well, and what I tell my clients is, you're looking for, who do you become when you're around them? And do you allow yourself to be yourself, or are you in a role that you're playing that you think the other person wants you to be? Because some relationships last for 20 years. In fact, the 20-year mark seems to be where it hit it, where people are like, "Oh my gosh, I was playing a role. I was
Mhm.
trying to please this other person, and they realize I don't like this." And the other person's oblivious because it doesn't usually, they're more outgoing, and it would never occur to them to pretend to be something that they weren't. And then you have these relationships and these marriages fall apart. So you want to really make sure that are you showing up as you, or are you constantly figuring out how to please, how to make the other
Or like
person
a people
want you?
pleaser. Well,
Yeah,
also, yeah, you got the issue where, like you said, somebody might not want to be alone. All their girlfriends or all their
friends. Yeah,
all their friends are married, and they kind of get pushed into it, and then they accept something that they really didn't want, and then they
yeah,
hope that they can change it, hope that it will get better.
yeah.
And this kind of mindset was like, well, I just, I guess it's good to be stable, good to be married and have the house and with the picket fence and all that. But it's like, are you really happy? And you have this like, these people midlife crisis. Like suddenly, I never got to date. I never checked anybody else out. I never really, and they felt like, well, I've kind of got forced into it because I felt like I was being, and it's really you made the decision, but a lot of times people will feel like they were kinda guided that way.
They do, they feel like I didn't have a choice, I thought I had to, and, our minds we've gotta remember our minds will retroactively rewrite history, right? And there's all kinds of research on this, and it's okay, it's part of being human, but you need to doubt your thinking, right? And just remember that, you wanna be as authentic as possible. You want to be yourself, and you wanna be making decisions based on, "Hey, is this who I want to be forever? And who I want to be with forever? Because this is what's happening in the context of this relationship. So does this feel right? Does this feel good? Not do I feel loved? Do I feel taken care of? Those are good things to ask, but sometimes there's a term love bombing, and what love bombing is it's what people do when they wanna make sure that there's a connection between themselves and the other person. And so if I get the idea is that if I give enough and make the other person feel good enough, they will stay with me and never leave me, and it's just not true. It
Mhm.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah, because like, you can put everything into it and they still leave.
Right. People
Because
say
it's
leave,
like they
change.
kinda, yeah, they don't feel it. Like, if you don't feel it, you don't feel it, and it's
Right.
kinda like it's like that song, "If it's not going right," we all know it's not going right.
Right, right.
It's just a matter. It's like it's so we can kinda fake it, but eventually the crowd's gonna thin out and no one's gonna show up. So
Exactly,
in your life, it's like you're gonna get to that point where you have the empty room, and then you gotta
exactly.
look at and all you have is the room and you, and you're like, "Okay, I better make a decision."
Well, and I love this because this is kind of coming back around to this is the kind of emotional safety that I teach in Swipe Safely is just learning the parameters and how to vet and how to be yourself and how to have the confidence early on that if you're making a decision to go forward with someone, it's based in the things that really matter to you, the things that are going to be important to you, because there is always going to be stuff about someone that you're with that you're like, oh, but, learning how to tell, are these things that are deal breakers or are these things that I can live with is such a huge part of it. And sometimes we think it's not a deal breaker and then we wake up and we're like, what was I thinking? So,
Mhm.
just getting lots of clarity is going to keep that emotional safety and also keep you from getting in a relationship where you feel kind of addicted to that love bombing, addicted to the idea of the relationship more than who you are and who what you've created, because the relationship is a separate thing. It doesn't exist outside of the context of you and the other person. So it's really a piece of art that only exists for as long as you're together, and if you break up, it just ceases to exist, but yeah.
It's interesting also to think about, like, people who are maybe, like, old-fashioned gentlemen, and they might seem very polite, but then you have to start to really uncover that. Is that really, a positive? And do you go through and, like, people who are who they are, like, you might have a certain set of political beliefs, you might have social beliefs, you might have all kinds of things. So if you never really are yourself, right? You put up a face to match because you don't want to be alone. But then if that's a core value, you have a core value, and that person is totally diametrically opposed to your value. You're really gonna stay in something that's not really you. You're gonna stay. So to me, you have to be kind of have boundaries or accept like certain things. Like if you're gonna be willing to push yourself down just to be in the relationship. Just to be
Absolutely. That's
right,
that's
so
where
you
yeah.
have to kinda make a choice. It's like, are you going to put yourself down just to be with that person? And I think you have to make, and that's a female or male. I've seen multiple people do it, doesn't really matter. I've seen, people
Yeah.
not be who they are.
I think you're 100% correct, and I love what you touched upon with behaviors. There are I call them trigger behaviors. That's kind of deceptive because we think of triggering different, like, but there are virtue. I guess it's kind of virtue signaling. Anyone can learn the behaviors that signal that you're a gentleman, like opening the door or you know, pulling out a seat for a woman, and all those are great, and I love if someone is a gentleman to me, but that doesn't mean that they're safe, and we kind of conflate like, "Oh, he opened the door, so he's a gentleman and he'll be a gentleman in every situation," which may or may not be true. And similarly with a woman, or, you know, and it doesn't matter your gender, like all these roles can be applied. Like a lot of men will say, "I want a sweet woman." I see in profiles like, so I want a woman who's sweet, which is great. And a sweet woman, I'd like a sweet man. Like sweetness, you definitely should want it, but don't think just because someone behaves sweetly in one scenario that they might not be passive aggressive in another. And then you'll
Mm.
be confused, like, wait, I thought she was sweet, so it must be me because this feels off. And what did I do? But really, they were holding something against you, and now they're being passive aggressive, even though they can be sweet in other areas. So you have to remember that people can show up different ways in different scenarios, and that
Yeah.
doesn't make them bad people. We're all human. There, I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. I've done it. Like I've been one way in one situation and another, and I want to grow and I want to be show up a good person authentically in every situation, and I'm only human. But we just have to remember that everyone has a different degree of ability to show up as a really good person. And are they hitting it 30% of the time? Are they hitting good person 50% of the time? What are their percentages, and can you live with it?
Yeah, it's kinda like after you have the formal dates and you start getting comfortable enough to put your hair down,
Yeah.
like, not
Yeah.
wear the best clothes all the time or not put on, like, all the airs and kinda like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go out with the blue jeans and the shirt," or so
Yeah.
not try to make yourself up,
Yeah.
right? And start to kinda get a little vulnerable.
Yeah.
And, like, and when you see that vulnerable person, do you still like that person, right?
Absolutely.
And you gotta kind of people have to make those judgments because eventually you're gonna be willing to kind of like, "Oh, yeah, I do go to the bathroom."
Exactly.
There might be a little flatulence here or something. It's like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
like
yeah.
willing to kinda and see what the reaction is if you're not the perfect person that you were on the first date, you know?
Well, and what I tell my clients is everyone has a lower self. Everyone has stuff that you know is not perfect. So you're looking for what ways is this person not, you know, still needing to improve. And like I've been doing this for long enough. I can tell like I'm, you know, I'm connecting with someone. I can say, oh, this person is insecure and a little bit anxious. Oh, this person has a little bit of a high opinion of themselves, but they're really like, and they have other good points, but I can start you see, and that
Mhm.
doesn't negate the kindness and the generosity and all the other good points. But I'm looking specifically and I'm trying to teach my clients and hit on it and swipe safely. How are we going to discern accurately? Because some people, oh, I can't tell you how many times my clients will be like, oh, I figured out that they have what I'm looking for, and they list something. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I had a client say, I'm looking for someone that's really empathetic in my relationship and really has empathy towards me. And they're a lawyer who works with Indigenous people. And so I know they have a great deal of empathy. And I'm like, this is an indication that they do have empathy in that area. But you would be amazed how people with high
Like,
degrees of empathy in one area
don't
might
have
not be able to translate it into a romantic relationship. So you can't make assumptions. It's really got to be
yeah, you could be working for
why.
Greenpeace and then
Yes,
they kinda have like, some kind of a attitude. You would think they'd be like, "Oh, they're a perfect person." They're
right,
always
right,
good, but they could have some negative behaviors that, they put so much energy into that they're not really empathetic with you, right? They
right.
or they're not very polite, or they could be rude and abrupt. But how could they be rude and abrupt when they're doing the Greenpeace? Well, because you didn't see the full picture.
Exactly,
Everybody can have multiple facets, to their personality. And,
exactly.
people always wanna expect the musicians, we run into this all the time. We have one song that everybody
Mhm.
loves, and
Uh-huh.
we might have 100 songs, and 100 songs are really who we are. And everyone wants to
Yes.
see the one song that they like, right? But, as an artist, like, I like my 99 other songs, I don't like my single, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
really, I'm really, like, more like the 99 other songs that you don't like.
That's
And
no, that's a great
and
way
that's
to
what
put
people
it.
don't get, and then they really wonder why the guy's not happy. They has to keep on playing that one song all the time.
Right. Well,
Because
and as a
you only
musician,
like one part of his personality.
No, that's such a good analogy, and as a musician, like, you could be dating what you might be able to watch someone, like, I work with older, so sometimes they'll date widowers and they'll know about the relationship the widower had before, but just because they had a loving relationship or even a toxic relationship before doesn't mean it will be that way with you. Because if you bring in a different guitarist, a different drummer, sometimes they mesh and sometimes the
They
song is
don't.
completely different.
Yeah,
And so
change.
you've got to see, like, you can't make an assumption. You can make an assumption and then test the hypothesis, but you can't like just mm, believe it to be true without testing it, without asking those questions, without being curious.
Yeah, you just have to understand, people put on masks. People, they do that to kind of make the world, work
Yeah.
because it's like you have your work mask, you have your home mask, you have your friend mask, not the same, but you have different faces you show people,
Well, and
you
I
know.
I like to call it trainings. Like, we're trained, like, we're all trained. This is your interview, and this is how you shake hands in an interview, and this is how you shake hands with a friend. So we have these ways we're told that this is how you should be in these different scenarios. And everyone's got different training and everyone has different experiences that make them more or less functional, situation specific.
Yeah, it's like situational awareness. And sometimes people want things to be one way. Yeah, I
Mhm.
kind of talking like one way folks is like, I want it to be like this way all the time. We can't have ice cream all day.
Yeah,
It's not gonna work. Like, you might like it, but it's not gonna work for you. Like,
right.
so do you kinda approach, dealing with romance like you want the ice cream sundae every day? It's like, well, that's not gonna happen every
Right, which is,
day.
for some people, the ice cream is sex, for other people, it's having, romantic gestures or just being physically near people, and you're right, I just love the musicianship that you have and that you're bringing to this. We're creating an album, we're creating a legacy, we're creating art together. A great relationship takes intelligence and understanding and mastering the instruments of communication and intimacy, not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy and playfulness and curiosity and being able to be there for each other and stand up for each other and to each other. There's so many elements to it.
Yeah, it's like, it's kinda like you have to kinda grow up in your mentality, and I think sometimes people, no matter what age they are, you can have wisdom at 20 years old and have this mindset, right? You could be 70 and not have the right mindset. Even though you've been around, you could still be kinda immature in your relationship concepts, right? You never really had a really good relationship, and you're kinda stuck in a loop of, like,
You
the
just
bad
did it.
stuff,
You
right?
just said it. If you haven't had experience, you don't know how to do it, and there's no shame in that. There's no shame, and I know for me, I hadn't had the kind of relationships I wanted, and I felt like I was, like, 10 or 15 years developmentally delayed when I went into my master's program. I'm like, and I just, "Okay, this is where I am," and you just own it and work on it and do the best you can. I love that. Yeah, I love how you said that.
Sometimes you have to accept kinda where you are and
Yeah,
then realize it's not the end, right? That you can always evolve as long as you're here. You can learn if you're willing to, like, learn from the lessons learned, and,
absolutely.
that I think that's the thing, like swipe safely, the idea of it is that you can't just think, "Oh, the phone is safe." Like, the
The app is
iPad is
safe.
safe, the tablet's safe, the computer's safe, right?
Or
So
I'm meeting someone in broad daylight, it's safe. I personally I used to work on a ship with all men, and I had mainly good experiences. There were a few, like, yeah, weird situations, but in general, it was really good. But when the situations came up, it was awkward and hard, but it taught me that you can relax and enjoy life, but know that at any point in time, somebody could make a bad choice that would affect you negatively. And I'm just constantly thinking, and I think this is why I've been able to keep my clients safe. So I'm thinking, like, okay, how do we approach the situation where it's warm and inviting and they get to see your best side and we keep you as safe as possible? That
I think
you're
it's just it's smart to kinda have a plan and not just, assume people are doing that for you. I
right.
think a lot of times people expect it's like any product. there's a lot of products it's like they put out in the world, and sometimes they're not they're not as safe as they should be. And so it's kind of
Right.
like buyer beware. Is like you have to have some judgment as to like just because they put it out there doesn't mean it's actually going to work or it's actually going to work as they said it's going to work. And so you have to, you know, kind of not be a doubting Thomas, but just the idea is like be
Discernment.
just be have some discernment and not just kind of go out with blinders and say, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's like not that you want to be under like, oh, I'm under attack. The wolf's at the door all the time.
Yeah.
You don't want to be too extreme in anything. It's more like a balance to understand it, so you don't become like immobile. You don't want to like, well, I can't do anything. I
Yeah.
can't. It's
I
not
can't
safe at
date.
all, so I can't touch it.
I'm
You
gonna
don't
have
want
to die alone because dating's unsafe. That's not what we want to happen. We want everyone to have a loving, connected relationship, but not have the wolf at the door. And even with Swipe Safely, the first thing I say is like, hey, it's going to be on your shoulders, but I'm going to teach you to think in ways that will keep you safer so you can use the tips and strategies I teach, but also in any situation you're in, advocate for yourself, make even better choices than I talked about because you're thinking about how to keep yourself safe.
I think that's really important, and I wanna thank you. Like, we always hit the hour mark quicker than I ever imagined,
Yeah.
but it happens all the time. We do have your link there, and, as you said, like, the app's not fully ready, but the link you can go to and check out
Yeah.
everything you have to offer, and, I do appreciate you being a guest on the Family Electric Goes podcast tonight.
Thank
I
you
think it's
so
been
much for having me.
illuminating, and it's very important to teach people things they maybe haven't heard or hadn't thought about, and that's why we do the podcast. But I
Just amazing. Thank you. I feel really honored to get this opportunity. You're a delightful host and yeah, people can look on Instagram or Facebook and just follow and then you'll know when it comes out and when it's live and when you can get it and access it. And thank you so much. This is really important. Like the stakes are so high. I didn't talk about some of the hairier heartbreaking situations, but we're talking about on the hard end of the spectrum, we're talking about rape, we're talking about assault, and we're talking about loss of life in some really, really heartbreaking ways. And that's what you said. Why do you do this? Because I want to keep that from happening. I want people to be able to date and feel comfortable and safe and be able to go home to their kids and their family and their loved ones and have a life unmarred by trauma because they didn't know how to keep themselves safe.
I think some of the things we talked about by not using your phone number, not giving out your full name, being the
Now
kind of
those are the
security
basic.
conscious, the same things that you wouldn't just let some salesman, have access to your credit card or your information if you're
Yeah.
not sure who they are. And it's
Yeah,
like
and that that
you
just
don't
reminded
want
me, I have a whole training on, like, how to deal with a date because you don't wanna, like there are ways to do it, like and to not be a freak when you do this, but to make sure that nobody can see your credit card when you're on a date, like, I was just following in a thread, the "Am I the asshole?" thread where somebody had something happen like that, where somebody, like, grabbed their credit card and figured out their name, and so, like, how do you navigate these situations? Like, so many things you don't think about until they come up, and now that man has her last name, and she
yeah,
has, you
probably
know,
use the swipe, kinda like,
your
things where
phone.
your
Yep,
phone or your watch, so
yep,
that's totally encrypted, nobody you don't
yep.
ever show it to me. Use that, so we're not trying to be fancy,
Yeah,
I'm actually trying to protect myself.
protect myself. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, thank you for this time. I appreciate it so much, Phantom. You've been great.
Thank you, have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.